Hello, this is Dr. Moore, and this video will address population growth. I'll begin by introducing exponential growth. I'll then discuss limits to growth, both density-independent factors and density-dependent factors. I'll finish by talking about logistic growth and the concept of carrying capacity. Exponential growth describes the growth of a population in an ideal environment with unlimited resources. You'll notice that an exponentially growing population grows faster and faster and faster as time goes on. This is because the larger the population gets, the more individuals there are to have babies. And since the resources are unlimited, there's nothing stopping those babies from growing up and having babies of their own. This results in the J-shaped curve that's typical of an exponentially growing population. A population that is growing exponentially is said to be growing at its biotic potential. In other words, the population is growing as fast as its biology allows. Now, you may be wondering if exponential growth is realistic. Would we ever expect to see exponential growth in a real population? And the answer is yeah, but only for a short period of time. The exponential growth model is useful to us when we're looking at a population that is so small that the resources are essentially unlimited. For example, an endangered species at the brink of extinction may grow exponentially as it comes back from the brink of extinction, as this population of elephants did once the establishment of a national park prevented human hunting in its habitat. Invasive species may grow exponentially after they are first introduced to a new habitat. The population of feral horses in the Australian Alps has been growing exponentially for the past 2 decades or so. But exponential growth cannot continue forever. Limiting factors prevent indefinite growth. Limiting factors are sorted into 2 categories. There's density-independent limiting factors and density-dependent limiting factors. Density-independent factors operate independently of population size. The number of mice in a field has no bearing on the likelihood of a volcanic eruption or a tsunami. And the number of herbs in a meadow doesn't affect the likelihood of a drought. You'll notice that density-independent factors are usually abiotic, and often they're natural disasters. Density-dependent limiting factors are limits to growth that intensify as a population grows larger. Food is an example of a density-dependent limiting factor. The more individuals there are in a population, the less food there is to go around, and the more likely it is that some individuals will die of starvation. Space is another limiting factor, especially for plants. The more plants there are, the harder it is for a new plant to find the space it needs to grow its roots and its branches. You'll notice that density-dependent limiting factors are often biotic, caused by interactions within and between populations. Density-dependent factors lead to logistic growth. Logistic growth describes the growth of a population in an environment with limited resources. When a population is growing logistically, the speed of population growth first speeds up as the population gets larger, but then slows down as density-dependent limiting factors intensify. This results in an S-shaped curve. In the logistic model, population growth stops once the population reaches its carrying capacity. Carrying capacity, represented by the letter K, refers to the maximum population size an environment can sustain over the long run. You can determine carrying capacity from a graph showing population size over time by looking for the place where the population growth curve levels off. In this graph, I can see that the carrying capacity for fur seals is about 10,000 individuals. This graph represents 2 replicates of an experiment in which researchers were trying to determine the carrying capacity of a Daphnia population grown in the lab. One run of the experiment is shown in blue, and the other one is shown in red. I'd argue that the carrying capacity of the Daphnia population is around 300 individuals per 200 milliliters. While the population peaked around 400 individuals per 200 milliliters in both runs of the experiment, this population size couldn't be sustained. Carrying capacity, remember, is not the maximum population size, but the maximum population size that can be sustained long term. As we can see from the Daphnia, it is possible for a population to overshoot its carrying capacity, and some conservationists worry that we humans have overshot ours. One final point to make in this video, both the exponential and the logistic growth model are just that, they're models. They represent patterns we observe in many different populations, but neither of them perfectly predict what we would expect to see in any particular population. It's normal for data to deviate from the smooth curves that are predicted by the mathematical models of the exponential and logistic model. And that concludes my video on population growth.